This is Alex and Jess's small group. We meet Monday at 7 p.m. in Oak Ridge. Take one.
And you're watching Chris's Corner.
Greetings, everybody. Chris, great to be with you today. Yeah. I got to be at James and Ann's small group in North Van this past week. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Did you go in the hot tub?
There was no hot tub. It was just
they have a hot tub.
Sorry, there was no time in the hot
opportunity
tub
for you to go in. Okay.
Yeah, there was other stuff happening.
Right.
But that's true. Great hot tub at James and Ann's. I feel like another reflection on the past week is just how small groups did so many different things. I know there was a crew that met together and brought supplies to give away and prayed and had hot chocolate in the cold, and I think it was raining, but I heard it was a beautiful time.
They did they did something under the Burrard Street Bridge, right?
Canby, one of the bridges.
Canby. Yeah, not Burrard, Canby.
Canby Bridge, yeah. Or Granville. That's my other guess.
Yeah. It was one of either of those.
I don't think it was Lionsgate.
No, that would be
very fun, very amazing to see small groups connecting together and doing such meaningful work. And then last week we didn't have this, but we did have some amazing teaching happen on Sunday. And so if you didn't catch it, Shelby, an amazing lady named Shelby, who spoke in North Van on God's power in our weakness. Chris did an amazing message on doubt and deconstruction. I've been listening to it, and I'm almost done in my spare time, and it was amazing.
Just over a few days, 10 minutes here,
10 minutes there. So just a note to say that those talks are so worth it. I think they're important talks for our church, and felt like a real important time of even reprieve and focus in the middle of the 10 Commandments series. And we're back.
Yeah.
10 Commandments.
We're back, and we've talked in last week. Alita mentioned how, the first half of the 10 Commandments, it's like vertical, our relationship with God.
Yes.
Second half, it's horizontal, our relationship with others. And even though the 10 Commandments, a lot of them are in a thou shalt not type of tone, they're really outlining two positive commandments: love God, love neighbor. This is what it looks like. And this week we talked about do not murder.
Yeah.
The shortest of the 10 Commandments, 2 words in the Hebrew. And when you first read it, you think, finally, a commandment I'm not consistently breaking. Another kind of reprieve. Finally, I am keeping this commandment consistently. Finally, a commandment that, if we're religious or not, I think we all agree with this one. This is a good one.
Yes.
And so for a moment, you feel like, oh, this is one I'm crushing. This is one finally a sermon where I'm not going to be convicted.
And then
Jesus is going to take it and apply it a little bit deeper.
He does what he does.
In an uncomfortable way. And so let me just give you a recap of the 3 things we talked about.
Perfect.
One, we discussed the theological basis of the commandment. We discussed the exact meaning of the Hebrew word translated as murder. And we discussed
something exciting coming up.
I got a lunch coming up pretty quick. And we discussed how Jesus applies this command to our own hearts. And so first, theological basis.
Yes.
We went back to Genesis 1, where it talks about all of humanity being made in the image and likeness of God. Fascinating when contrasted with other ancient Near Eastern creation stories, where maybe only the king is made in the image of God. Here, Genesis 1, all of humanity, male, female, made in the image and likeness of God. And this kind of bestows, I like that word, bestows,
it's a great word,
a sacredness on human life. And there's this reality, and this is one of the reasons why it would be the theological basis of the command, do not murder. There's a reality that when we mistreat an image bearer of God,
any
a fellow
human being,
any human being, it's an assault on God himself, in whose image we're made. And so that was point 1.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Anything you want to add
to
that? Okay.
Let's keep moving.
Point 2 was the meaning of the Hebrew word translated as murder. There's actually 8 words in Hebrew for kill. And this word translated as murder isn't used for the law courts or for the military or for the killing of animals. It's really the unlawful killing of a human being. And so some older translations would translate it as do not kill or thou shalt not kill. But that's a little bit misleading. It's more specific. It's around the unlawful killing of a human being, hence the translation murder. And so we
Super
talked
helpful.
about that.
I didn't know that about the 8 words.
I didn't know that either. There's only, I think, 8,000 words in Hebrew. And so it's not a huge vocabulary. And 8 words on kill feels intense.
And to be clear, I knew it before now, but not until I read it in your manuscript.
Oh, yeah,
So,
right.
Because I did, yeah.
And so the third thing, though, where it gets a little bit uncomfortable is what Jesus does
Yes.
with this commandment.
Just when we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, like, yep, that's a massive problem. Love the thought. God cares about all life.
It's a good rule.
Yeah, we're like, I agree. And then Jesus does what he does, and he goes, actually, the thing that leads to murder exists in human hearts. Contempt, a kind of anger that further down the path actually gets to the point of murder. And so in the Sermon on the Mount, like he does with other things, he goes, yeah, here's the command, but let me take you deeper and show you that you are guilty as well.
Yeah, we want to focus just on the behavior or the action. We want to mow over the weeds. Jesus wants to pull them up by their root. He wants to go deeper.
Yeah.
And invite us into not just like humane behavior, but like a new humanity.
100%.
And so he'll talk about anger, and this is not a righteous anger in response to something terrible happening, which is entirely appropriate. It's like an unrighteous anger, a sinful anger that expresses itself in harmful ways. It's an anger that hardens into real contempt for a human being. And it's not the same as actual murder, but they're traveling on the same road.
Yeah, what I found really uncomfortable as I studied this topic and the text is, well, I found it really uncomfortable how quickly my heart gets to the point of disregarding a human being, like feeling hateful, feeling angry, and often for such stupid reasons, for nothing reasons, like how that kind of thing exists in my heart where I so quickly don't value somebody as I ought to. And just some silly illustrations, but I just think about things that happened like this last week in my life, like got angry at someone. Felt angry towards someone who I'd ordered food from because their machine was down, so I had to pay e-transfer, and it took like 7 more minutes, and I was in a rush, and I left like super convicted. I'm like, I'm a horrible person. I can't believe how angry I felt towards them. And then I was driving home the other night trying to find parking. There was some sort of like rally at City Hall. Had no idea who was rallying, what it was for, but I was like, in moments, felt angry at everyone who'd taken all the spots close to my house. I was like, what's wrong with me? And then I found myself reflecting on this documentary that I watched recently on David Beckham, who is this legendary soccer player for England, like one of the best soccer players ever. And in the documentary, there's this moment he reflects. You saw the doc as well? Yeah. Pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
He reflects on this 1998 World Cup where he made a mistake. Like he tripped someone, ends up getting a red card.
He tripped someone who embellished a little.
And it was wild. Like he reflects on, and they show clips of what England did to him in light of this mistake. He's this young guy, and the whole country just goes after him for months and even years. He's heckled, yelled at, spat on,
banging on his car.
It's crazy. And for me, it illustrates what Jesus is getting at that exists in the human heart. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, like a disregard for the humanity of another. They just become an object of your animosity. They become an obstacle in your way.
Right.
It's just this profoundly dehumanizing reality that arises so quickly in our hearts when provoked. And that's what Jesus is after.
Yes.
And that's what the gospel and the Spirit wants to uproot and address in our hearts. And I think for us, as we talk about it and even ask the question, like, how do we then wrestle with the unrighteous anger that can harden into contempt?
Yeah.
There is this part where we do acknowledge it. We acknowledge the anger. We acknowledge that it lives in us. And I think there's this process we go on where like contempt for another human dehumanizes them.
Yes.
And so we actually have to rehumanize them in our hearts.
Right on. That's so
good. And we start to do that by just acknowledging the weightiness of the fact that they too are made in the image and likeness of God. They too are precious to God.
So good.
They too are someone for whom Jesus died. that starts to rehumanize them in our heart and in our mind. And then we remember that we too have done contemptible things, and yet God didn't treat us with contempt.
Yeah.
He moved towards us with love and grace and mercy. And as we've received it, we learn to extend it.
Yeah.
And we go on this like costly, difficult journey filled with fits and starts called forgiveness,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean neglecting justice, which doesn't mean removing appropriate boundaries.
Right. Right.
It's not just a one-time event. It is a journey. It's a choice before it's a feeling. But what it does is it reflects the gospel in our human relationships. We've received grace, and when we extend it, undeserved, unmerited favor that we've received, we extend. And as we go on that journey in community, applying the gospel to our hearts, empowered by the Holy Spirit, Jesus more and more starts to uproot this reality of contempt and unrighteous anger in our hearts. And so there's a lot to discuss and get into in small groups. And so you have a discussion guide we're going to throw to you now, and have a great discussion.
Yeah.